1998, Hot Water Music frontmen Chuck Ragan and Chris Woolard, along with Samantha Jones, formed Rumble Seat, an acoustic folk side project that released 4 7-inch singles and recorded an LP before breaking up not long after. The LP, Rumble Seat is Dead, didn't release until 2005. A year later, Chuck Ragan would leave Hot Water Music and begin a solo acoustic folk career, starting something never before done in punk rock history.
'Cause I can't stand feeling nothing. I can't stand feeling old. I can't stand standing for nothing when standing up is all I know.
In the years following his split from Hot Water Music, Chuck would find himself returning to his old day job as a carpenter. Despite not being in a band, he continued to write music on his acoustic guitar around the house. At the insistence of his wife, he recorded demos of those songs and released them as the Blueprint Sessions. It made the rounds online among old Hot Water Music fans and the punk scene, picking up a lot of steam in the process. On February 19th, 2007, he recorded his set at Tangiers, a venue in Los Feliz, California. This recording went on to be released as his debut live album, Los Feliz, for Side 1 Dummy Records, a record label that defined punk in the late 2000s and early 2010s. The album was well received by critics and fans, a live recording of very personal and intimate songs performed in front of a small audience. It also works as a sort of demo, with early versions of songs he would later refine with future albums. After the release of Los Feliz, Chuck went into the studio along with legendary punk producer Ted Hutt and recorded his debut studio album, Feast or Famine. It's an album that contrasts the warmth of its vocals with its wintry instrumental sound, creating a haunting atmosphere that captures a sense of transition and a sense of longing for simplicity. The album was also well received by critics. Sputnik Music gave the album a 3.7, saying, "The influence of pre-Highway 61 revisited Dylan is particularly strong, as well as Celtic and British folk, and pre-rock and roll blues and country. The wide variety of sounds represented on the album is joyful to behold." In their 5-star review, AllMusic.com wrote, "It's not really Americana, although it's certainly folky in places, but with violins, harmonicas, acoustic guitars, and banjos tempered by percussion and organ, there's a surprising richness to much of the album, and even a tinge of punk here and there. Ragan's search is on, and listeners will be glad they joined on his quest." Patrick Book at punknews.org gave it 4 stars. It focuses on Ragan's love for and appreciation of life itself. That's the main lyrical theme, as every song centers around family, passion, love, and Chuck's unwavering belief in a higher power. He's an unflailingly positive guy. Plenty of songs here retain the bare-bones feel of the Blueprint Sessions, consisting of little more than acoustic guitar, Chuck's strong harmonica, and his vocals. Those that receive extra instrumental flourishes could come across as too country for a lot of punk fans, but the fiddle and accordion that mark songs like California Burritos and Do You Pray are more roots than country. Ragan has touched on a very solid, honest sound. It might be softer than Fuel for the Hate Game, one of Hot Water Music's best albums, but he remains undoubtedly one of the most inspiring musicians working today. Meanwhile, Tim Berry, the lead singer of the hardcore band Avail, was 2 years and 3 releases into his own acoustic solo career, starting with an EP of 4 studio songs and a small set he did at, get this, his kids' elementary school. Not only is it really cool to hear him entertain a bunch of kids who are having a good time at a show, but it helps balance out the often dark and melancholy songs that make up the studio portion of the EP. In contrast to Chuck's more positive work, Tim Berry went really dark for his first album. The songs on his debut, titled Ravenna Junction, often told stories of hard living, tragedy, and a yearning to leave it all behind and start over. He had been playing them live as well, opening up for various bands in the process. Something was in the water for gravelly voiced frontmen of legendary punk bands hitting their early 30s, and the fans were drinking it up. In all the excitement, Chuck decided to tour his album, but not in the traditional way. In 2006, Chuck had conceived an idea for a tour reminiscent of the types of shows his mother, Geraldine, a folk singer herself, would play during Chuck's childhood. In an interview with punknews.org in 2008, Chuck Ragan said, "We're fired up beyond belief. When my wife and I started sketching it out, we wanted to break the mold of the same old opener, band, headliner, done thing. Not to say this has ever been done before, because it has in many forms. It's just, as far as I know, it hasn't been done within the scene I've been part of. From note 1, We plan to all take the stage together. We'll be accompanied on this tour by fiddles, stand-up bass, pedal steel, banjos, and more. As the show progresses, it will turn and fade to each other alone or with minimal accompaniment, with just a couple intermissions rather than changeovers. Or hell, we might just keep on playing. This unique approach created a more relaxed and communal vibe to their performances, which, when mixed with the tiny venues they played at, led to one of the most uniquely intimate and down-to-earth experiences punk rock has ever offered. The first revival tour started in Hollywood on July 18, 2008 and ended in Little Rock, Arkansas on November 13th. They were joined by Frank Turner from the UK, along with Austin Lucas, Chuck's old Hot Water Music bandmate Chris Woolard, and Against Me Laura Jane Grace during the band's peak popularity. Of the September 28th show in Orlando, Jen Cray of Ink19.com said, "Never in all my concert-going adventures have I encountered this degree of goodwill. The sort of egoless camaraderie on stage spilled over into the audience as strangers threw their arms around one another, cheering on the musicians with beer cans raised high above their heads, with each man's set ending not with a long breakdown in wait, but with an introduction of the next musician. There was no lull between acts. No downtime means no loss of momentum, which made the whole evening feel like a party in someone's living room where the guitar just kept getting passed around from player to player. Needless to say, this down-home atmosphere put everyone in the mood to get nice and drunk, band members included. Beers and shots were repeatedly passed up into the hands of the men at the mics, who happily toasted the fans in thanks. Yes, alcohol played a big part in the evening's festivities, but the overriding factor that made the night so special was the feeling of intimacy and family. Tim Barry told stories about losing loved ones and about the unreal beauty of holding his newborn niece in his hands the day before the tour began. The whole show was a spine-chilling event. The vibe was loose, the spirit light, and the emotional effect was memorable. The same can be said of the tour as a whole. Martin Sismar of the Phoenix New Times said of the November 5th show, "It's a solid 3-hour show, divided by sets that bleed into each other as the musicians come on and off the stage. You could say they're punk rock's answer to the Traveling Wilburys, a super group of singers from established bands who've come together to have some fun. It was a full-on hardcore hootenanny, a jam I'd imagine Woody Guthrie would be happy to join in on, strumming away on his famous fascist-killing guitar and calling for one more round of the chorus." Lou Medrano of Big Wheel magazine said of the final show, "What you got was a wild and crazy punk rock hoedown. There is something magical that happened that night during their set. It was almost like watching the Johnny Cash and Bob Dylans of our generation performing together. It doesn't get any better." The response this tour received from the audience was definitely well deserved, as was the attention it received from many in the music industry. I was told by a friend of mine at the Knitting Factory that every major label representative was there that night to witness this show. Also, while hanging out backstage, I could hear people like Chuck Ragan and Ben Nichols constantly applauding each other for a job well done, a great idea, and most importantly, an exceptionally good time. When I was talking to Tim Barry after the show, he expressed to me that going the solo route and joining this tour was the smartest thing he's ever done. None of these guys have ever received as much attention from their previous bands as they are right now as solo artists, and it's undoubtedly due to the music they are able to create and share with one another. It was clear that Chuck, Tim, Ben, and all the guests along the way had stumbled onto something truly special. The tour was a huge success, not just for audiences, but for the artists themselves. Everyone who played the first tour came back to play subsequent ones. The second year of the revival tour, Tim Barry returned along with Sparta and At the Drive-Ins, Jim Ward, Dave House of the Loved Ones, Jenny Owen Youngs, with Kevin Seconds and Frank Turner also returning for another round of guest spots. Needless to say, revival tour made an impact, and the tour got a little bigger. Youngs, not even connected to the punk world, was still at home among the older punks and embraced by their fans. This time, Chuck was playing songs off his fresh new album, Gold Country, releasing 1 month before the beginning of the tour. The album went on to be another critical darling for Chuck. Corey S. of Scene Point Blank gave the album an 8.7 out of 10 and wrote, "Here we see Ragan take the folk approach he did on Feast or Famine and add a bit of flavor to it by adding even more instruments into the mix. There are plenty of fiddles present on the majority of the tracks, which give Gold Country a pretty strong country vibe rather than a folk one. Gold Country almost tops Feast or Famine as Chuck's songwriting continues to not disappoint. There are also a few tracks where he sounds more powerful and emotional than ever before. Chuck Ragan has done it again. Gold Country is a new direction for this country sound, and it's an experiment that really works for him. The thing is, this isn't just an acoustic album with country elements added in. It actually sounds like he worked really hard to make this an authentic country album. Channing Freeman of Sputnik magazine gave it a 4 out of 5. For this latest album, Gold Country, the Western influences are even more apparent than they ever were on Feast or Famine. More instruments, more gang vocals, and ultimately the album is stronger for it. This album is more involved, the music is more immersive, and dear God, his voice is absolutely perfect for this style of music. Jordan Rogowski gave it a 4.5 out of 5 for punknews.org. Something about Ragan's solo material is different. Something about it is truly special in a way that most other singer-songwriters can't even hope to understand. It's raw, it's earnest, it's moving and it's captivating, and it's everything one could ask for in an album. There's no doubt that he's the man who puts every bit of heart and soul into his music. While emotion is one of Ragan's major strengths, another is the variance in tempos and styles on the record. Singer-songwriters are a dime a dozen, but Chuck Ragan, well, he's something special. Punktastic.com gave it a glowing review as well, saying, "Put simply, this is the best album to come out of the US this year. It's 40 minutes of soulful, heartfelt, gritty emotion wrapped up in acoustic guitars, fiddles, and that oh-so-husky voice." The first thing you notice about this record is that it has more of a beefed up sound to it. Additional musicians and instruments play their part in generating a bigger sound. There's nothing fancy about Chuck Ragan or his music. It's about as honest as it gets, delivered almost nonchalantly yet undeniably heartfelt. Gold Country won't dazzle you with extravagance or pompousness. It'll dazzle you with integrity and simple vision.
What do you feel that you achieved musically with Gold Country?
I mean, the whole point of that record was just to do something a little more stripped down and away from like the production aspect that we put on Feast or Famine, and I think we did it. It was a simple way of recording a record. And, it was the first record that I'd ever, I guess, officially produced myself. And I love it, but, just like anything else, playing music or doing any kind of art, you do something and you just love it, you got everything into it, and then you give it 6 months and you go back and you're like, I could have done this and this and this. But, I mean, that's the whole point, right, is just to constantly evaluate yourself, constantly look at what you've done and figure out how you're going to do it better next time. And, for Gold Country, I mean, I wanted to make a stripped down record. I wanted to get my friends involved. I wanted to do something where, we were all living in the same place, recording in the same place, finishing a day of tracking and going and building a fire and just kind of sitting around the fire and talking about what we did, what we're going to do tomorrow. And we did it.
Jen Cray of Ink19.com returned to review the Orlando show and said, "Between the players and their myriad instruments, which counted an accordion, a mandolin, and an upright bass amongst the usual assortment of acoustic guitars, every inch of the long, narrow stage was beaten down. For Jim Ward, this meant quietly concentrating his way through a toe-tingling collection of Sleepcar and Sparta tunes that, unfortunately, the majority of the audience missed because their conversations were seemingly more interesting. Ward berated the crowd when the chatter became too loud to ignore and added, 'I've got a microphone and I can just get louder.' Hidden in the dark on the side of the stage as he was, I wondered if the chatterboxes would have shut the hell up had they opened their eyes and realized that, hey, that's the dude from At the Drive-In." Regardless of whether or not you knew the man's colorful musical history, Ward poured his soul into his delivery, and those who listened were enraptured. Even with the less than perfect audience, this traveling troupe of music lovers were having a ball with one another on stage. Abba May, the soul bringer of estrogen on the tour, packed sweet charm in addition to powerful vocal cords. Chuck Ragan is bringing a sincere love of music back to the world of touring with this show, and it's a project he hopes and plans to continue. The 2010 revival tour brought back Tim Barry, Ben Nichols, and Frank Turner for a protracted 9-date tour in Australia. Of the April 28th show in Perth, Simon Clark of the AUReview.com said, "Here are some things we learned, in no particular order. 1. Whiskey causes feedback. 2. Whiskey makes your voice sound awesome. And 3. 6 guys, 4 guitars, a fiddle, pedal steel, and a whole load of attitude makes for a night of great music. With all the artists on stage, everyone playing everyone else's songs," which of course led to some very early highlights and some damned high expectations for the rest of the evening, and went on to be very positive of the concert overall. There isn't much out there about the 2010 Revival Tour, but what there is shows that Australia was just as swept away by the Revival Tour as the US was. Chuck's goal with the Australia run was to bring the idea of the Revival Tour to the international stage, and it was a resounding success for those who showed up. It's important to note that while all this was going on, Hot Water Music would occasionally do short tours here or there alongside the Revival Tour. However, it was around this time that the band started writing new music, and the possibility of recording a new album started to become a reality. To add more to Chuck's already full plate, rumors of a collaboration with Gaslight Anthem's Brian Fallon on a new album started making the rounds. In a 2010 interview with Punk Rock Theory, Chuck said, "We are doing a full-length record. So far we've just been writing songs on our own and sending them back and forth. The game plan is to try and record some stuff on this tour." Given how busy Chuck was between his various music projects, it was no surprise that something was being sacrificed in order to keep it all afloat. And sadly, that sacrifice was his marriage. Later in the same interview, Chuck would go on to say, "It's been tough because my wife and I basically coordinate the Revival Tour. We make the schedule and the decisions, but just doing that and the solo stuff and balancing simple everyday home life, and now Hot Water Music is doing more stuff, it's quite the juggling act." Things will continue to get more complicated, as the Revival Tour had not only built up a reputation among punks and indie fans, but also among many musicians among the scene at the time. In the same interview, Chuck continued on, saying, "A lot of people that are good friends and artists that I've never played with have shown interest in the Revival Tour."
Like my wife and I, we've just kind of spearheaded this whole, thing, and it's our passion. It's our top priority. It's what we want to do. It's what we want to carry on for years ahead of us. It's not an original idea. It's not. It's a very, very old school way of sharing music.
2011 was the year the dam burst open for punks putting out folk and alt-country releases. Brian Fallon of the Gaslight Anthem, Dan Andriano of Alkaline Trio, and Nick 13 of Tiger Army all had debut solo albums and side projects, ranging from bluesy rock, in the case of The Horrible Crows from Brian Fallon, acoustic-driven singer-songwriter folk like Dan Andriano in The Emergency Room, and the straight-up country turn Nick 13 takes on his one and only solo album, Nick 13. This was essentially the second wave of projects that pushed the punks turned folk trend in different directions, something Chuck Ragan mentioned himself on a statement he made when the 2011 tour dates were announced. Today's folk movement has been evolving faster than ever, and it's a real joy to see and hear true, honest music with simple instruments become appreciated by the general public. Revival is certainly music from the people, for the people, and this world is overflowing with inspiration and artists for that energy. There will always be simplicity, there will always be basics, and it's hard for me to see that ever aging.
Apparently you're working on some fantastic album right now. A new album. Well, Casey, your tour manager, said you got to talk to him about this new album he's working on because it's going to be awesome.
I have a crazy idea, and I don't even know if it's going to work. I feel like it could work, but I found this old farmhouse out in the San Ynez Mountains. I found this place randomly, and it's basically, this old, or a few different structures, these old farmhouses that were built in the late 1700s. One from New Hampshire, one from West Virginia, one from somewhere in the Carolinas. And back in the 80s, they moved them out here and they put them all together with all the original lumber, nails even, like a lot of, it's just gorgeous. It's not a studio. But I found it randomly. I went out and I checked it out because I saw it and I'm like, man, I would love to record a record there. Just like get there. As long as you have just some simple gear, you have the right microphones, just have at it. Get the right people involved, and it's more so all about just tapping in to the right energy of the place. And when I saw the place and kind of walked around there, and it sits on 150 acres out here in the mountains, and it's gorgeous. It's gorgeous, and the acoustics look like they would just sound incredible in there. And it was one of those things where I just thought, man, if I could make this record sound like this place feels to me, then that's it. That's the most.
How many songs do you have so far? I mean, do you have songs that you're thinking of doing there?
Oh yeah, well shoot, I don't know, man. I mean I've got 15 or 16 that I can play start to finish, and I've got another, I don't know, 7 or 8 that I would love to finish before we went into it. You know,
Is this going to be like a full band or just like a 3-piece?
I would like to do it. I would like to do it more stripped down. I would like to do it. You know, a lot of the past few records that we've done, you know, we've all, you know, kind of embellished it here and there. You know, playing organ on it or playing these things or, you know, things that we weren't able to duplicate live tonight, right? And I still love playing those songs, but you know, I would love to do a record that we can completely, you know, transfer from the record to the stage. There's no, you know, it sounds the way it is. I wanna make the songs stand up on their own, and just do it simple, do it in an old school way, and just, you know, cut loose and try and get some real good sounds. We all have great instruments. You know, all the boys are really, really talented. I have no doubt that we can make a great record. I want to strip it down even further than what we've done.
Chuck released his third album, Covering Ground. In an interview with Highway 81 Revisited, he went on to say, "Oh yeah, well, we're calling it Covering Ground because that's what we've been doing since we put Gold Country out. We're just trucking. A lot of songs on the new record are either written on the road or written about the road. Either the trials, the sacrifices you make doing something you love, to everything like making it home safe and sound to the ones you love. Just a record full of road songs, man. I'm thrilled to start getting it out there. We're extremely excited about it. It just feels like we've definitely raised the bar for ourselves on everything that I've recorded. I'm just thrilled with it." Covering Ground was Chuck's first album to be listed on Metacritic, where it has a 78 based off 6 positive reviews. Sputnik Music once again gave this album a 4 out of 5, saying, "Ragan's third solo album is a mastery of his stripped-down Americana, with only strings, occasional backing vocals, a harmonica, and an acoustic guitar to cultivate with. Ragan is howling his way through his most potent collection of songs yet." With Covering Ground, the Hot Water Music frontman is making a serious case for his relatively new direction to continue. Bold, anthemic, and poignant. Ragan's third release indicates just how intoxicating his material can be, even with nominal instrumentation. AV Club gave it a B-, saying, "The third effort from Ragan is a tour diary, a travel-weary reflection on a life spent mostly in transition. And though he's no stranger to being on the road, Covering Ground shows where the cracks have started to grow in the asphalt. His verses are written in first person, and his choruses are soul-bearing declarations. And though the record fumbles at parts with being almost too simplistic, Ragan never lingers on any one song long enough for it to matter." Punknews.org gave it a tepid 4 out of 5, saying, "The album really doesn't bring anything new to the table as far as songwriting goes for Ragan, though once again, he delivers another solid album." Chuck's Revival Tour experiment was starting to spread in the minds of his peers, and though he was never part of the Revival Tour, the timing of Nick 13's solo album could not be denied. Nick 13 signed on to Sugar Hill Records, a label that mainly put out bluegrass and Americana music, to release his self-titled debut country album. To anyone familiar with Tiger Army, it was no surprise Nick 13 would take a country turn. Along with making catchy and memorable psychobilly punk, their slower acoustic-based songs always carried a distinctly country sound, and his debut album expands on this by offering different flavors of country while maintaining a sound distinct to Nick 13. The album initially had a lot of heat behind it, being critically well received and having his videos hit #1 on CMT's Pure Countdown for multiple weeks. He toured heavily and played festivals in support of the album. Unfortunately, that heat didn't burn for long for reasons I think become apparent in this interview with Yahoo.com. Though Tiger Army's music is quite different at times, the existing fan base was very open to the new stuff and were supportive. I think the country world, and Nashville in particular, tends to be a bit guarded. Let's face it, there have been a lot of bad country records made by people coming from other genres. So I understand why a lot of people in Nashville and the country world feel you have to prove yourself. Instead of the standpoint of, oh cool, what's this? It's more like, who is this guy? Is his heart in the right place? Does he even know what he's doing or trying to do? There were people that I met who implicitly or or sometimes explicitly, didn't regard California very highly. Their attitude is, what do you know about country music coming from California? This passage right here seemed revealing especially. It was a big risk because the album Music from Regions Beyond that Tiger Army had just done, that was our biggest visibility nationally in terms of the press we got, late night shows, radio. So it was a pretty rash decision, you know? Instead of following that up, shift gears and do this risky thing that may not work. In 2013, Nick 13 had said that he was 80% done writing a second solo album, but sadly it has yet to be released. It seems that Nick 13 just had trouble finding a new audience in the country scene. Given that the bro country sound was starting to rear its head, and just how unique Nick 13's image and songs were, it's an unfortunate but not surprising outcome given how traditional the genre is. But while Nick 13 was giving his country career a go, Chuck and the boys were touring Europe in what would be, at the time, the biggest lineup since the tour started. George Gadd of AlterThePress.com said, Alkaline Trio's Dan Adriano is surprisingly charismatic and is a comedian in his own right, staying in true to his roots by even going so far as to take requests from one fan for Enjoy Your Day from 1999's God Damn It. Dan truly showcases the high points of this tour, focusing heavily on material from 2003's Good Morning, as well as material from his recent solo effort, Hurricane Season. Releasing his Side Projects album earlier that month, Brian Fallon takes the stage with fellow Horrible Crows member Ian Perkins and performs a choice selection of songs from their recent effort, Elsie, including personal highlight, Crush. It's quite amazing how one tour can round up so much talent and package it together on one bill. The Revival Tour shows the positive light of touring the world and the relationship between each artist and the audience by removing the pedestal that the audience members place the bands on. Daniel Lynch of StereoBoard.com said, every song sounded huge in the reasonably large venue. Whether with solo, vocal, and acoustic, or, as was the case with almost every song, the main performer being joined on stage by one of his comrades. Opener Dave House and Chuck Ragan after him benefited immensely from the sheer ferocity of their delivery, both vocally and with the guitar. Both roared and screamed their raspy vocals into the mics, banging the guitar in time and keeping the audience involved with chanting and clapping. With a less powerful but no less impressive delivery, Dan Adriano had more of a job maintaining audience attention. But a cover of Alkaline Trio's song Blue Carolina was a hit with the crowd. Adriano at times added more to the performances of his partners in crime, with more appearances during their sets than Fallon or Ragan. But his solo set proved that he wasn't just making up numbers on the tour. Fallon performed songs from the solo release, Elsie. Deathly silence fell over the Academy as, for the duration of Lady Killer and Cherry Blossoms, the duo held the audience in a trance, broken only by the resumption of mayhem when the songs ended and applause erupted from every section of the crowd. Perkins left Fallon to perform Gaslight Anthem songs, Navasink Banks, and a stripped-down version of Old White Lincoln. The 2011 European tour further spread the Revival Tour internationally. It seemed all of Reagan's bets had paid off. There was a tangible sense of camaraderie and friendship that was felt by everyone in the audience and on stage. This vision had come to fruition, yet the cost he was paying back home was starting to add up. The following is taken from an article in Female First from October 2011. Needless to say, the tour surpassed any expectations Chuck and his wife may have had, in part due to the uniqueness of the event. Chuck agreed, it's a special tour. It's like none other that I've ever been a part of. He added, it's important for me to not only bring this music that we believe in, these people that we love, but also use this tour as a platform to showcase artists who no one knows about. As well as founding and performing on the tour, Chuck is constantly planning the next one, although the way the lineup comes together is still quite fluid. He explained, it usually starts where I'll find one person or friend who believes in the tour and would love to be a part of it. From there, they discuss the lineup and see how it goes from that point. It's next to impossible, I'll be honest with you, Chuck revealed. He explained that he's away from home enough as it is, but he said he's lucky to have the strongest woman he's ever known in his life to help him. Chuck quite openly and frankly paused and admitted, it's really tough to find that balance of hanging on to the passion and doing what you want to do, but also being responsible to your loved one. Touring has become a complete necessity to fund and support the making of an album in order to sustain your career. People think all musicians have a glamorous and easy lifestyle, but Chuck explained that it couldn't be further from his truth. People get this totally wrong idea. They see the tour bus and they just think you're living high and mighty, he said, adding, this is our home. That's where we live. For the majority of us, it's still completely hand to mouth. Chuck describes it as a labor of love, with the acts truly loving, appreciating, and enjoying the opportunity they have to do this for a living. He never seems to have time to rest, however. revealing that work is constantly going into planning the next tour. It's important for us to constantly revive it. The lineup will always change, he said. Chuck also hinted that it's not something he'll perform on forever. Eventually, it's going to be something that I can step off of and just help coordinate and help run it. Just have this music constantly brought to the people. The future for the revival tour, Chuck revealed, will see them giving back to the local communities that have helped them out over the years, as well as bringing fresh acts around the world. The essence and aim of the tour will always remain nicely summed up by Chuck. That's the goal, to be able to support music that we believe in.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying my stuff. While I have your attention, I'd like to talk about some of my friends over at the Fandom Initiative. We're a group of geeks from all walks of life who see crap like this, and this, and this, and think there needs to be an alternative because these dudes are whiny, entitled, and lame.
Lil Movie Perp says, is this where the salty fanboys hang out and complain about not being pandered to anymore? Are we salty fanboys? I don't know.
I think there are channels that do that better than us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, also, I don't care. Like, yeah, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah.
Okay. But you yourself just like said that like in China they will edit out black people out of posters and other marketing and gay people and stuff like that too, right?
Right.
So how could you say they have a woke agenda if they're willing to go against their wokeness for profit?
What?
What's more racist, calling somebody a nigger or doing a lynching?
So, if you enjoy sincere and open-minded geekdom, entertaining debates, live streams, and video essays, all in service of debunking right-wing media grifters like Nerdrotic, Critical Drinker, Geeks and Gamers, The Quartering, and more. So much more. My God, there's so much of this crap. Check out Turf Nation, Organized Chaos, or Actual Fandom. Check out the Fandom Initiative channel, or check out my long-running series, These People Hate Cinema, for an idea of what we cover. Anyways, that's all for this ad. Let's get back to the video.
Hey, Dad, we will see this MC
2012 saw two legs of the Revival Tour. The spring tour covered the US and Canada, featuring Nathaniel Rateliff, Corey Brannon, Austin Lucas, Dan Adriano, returning for a second tour in a row, and Laura Jane Grace. This time around, no one was promoting a new release. Everyone who signed up this year did it solely for the love of the experience. At the March 30th show at the Bowery in New York, Bill San Antonio said, as Ragan promised before each show began, surprises were plentiful throughout the night, as Owens Young performed an abrasive cover of Johnny Cash's Ring of Fire and broke a string later in her set during the second show. House played Hot Water's music Trusty Chords. Adriano played Alkaline Trio's Radio, albeit with Ragan on guitar and lead vocals. They played a second show at the Bowery that night, just a few hours later starting at midnight. Dying Scene said of the second show, bearing in mind that it was midnight and that all 8 musicians had already played a full set just a few hours before, there was an incredible amount of energy on stage. Even with each act only playing for roughly 20 minutes, the show still managed to go on for 3 hours without anyone slowing down. To put it simply, the Revival Tour is unlike anything else today in the world of punk rock, and it should not be missed by anyone even remotely interested in any of the performing musicians. Face to Face Reunion 08 at punknews.org said of the Chicago show, one of the most fun concert experiences I've ever had. The party was all out by this point. I was even getting chills up my spine. Everyone was clapping along, and everyone on stage was having the time of their lives. You could get a sense they all love playing music together. It was even funny seeing McIlrath up there giving some unfamiliar songs a try, with Lucas whispering lyrics in his ears before they came. Overall, a perfect night. My only disappointment was that I missed so many other previous Revival tours. Never again. On May 3rd, Chuck was interviewed by John Figelshaller for ElmoreMagazine.com, and what shows the first crack in the armor for the future of the Revival Tour. To anyone paying attention to the songs these artists put out, there was an unmistakable pattern that was forming as a common theme in all their releases. That of being on the road and missing their loved ones back at home. Something that is said explicitly in this quote from the interview. Speaking of records, it must be noted that Ragan's original outfit, punk rock powerhouse Hot Water Music, has a new album out, Exister. Having been on hiatus since 2006, this will be their first offering of new music since 2004. It will undoubtedly be an amazingly powerful powerful piece of driving melodic rock. On breathing life back into Hot Water Music, Ragan says, "I don't know if I bit off more than I can chew or not, man. To be honest with you, I know I'm definitely playing with fire right now. My music and the revival tour has been my main focus for years now, and taking all this Hot Water Music stuff on, I'm not regretting it. I don't have time for regret. It's going to take some balance and care, just taking care." Ragan's slight ambivalence about the awakening of Hot Water Music, along with the ongoing revival tour, obviously doesn't stem from a lack of interest in the projects, but from their consuming nature. He is a family man, and speaks frankly about the strain that being on the road puts on his relationships with his wife and dog. The US leg of the revival tour ended on April 21st in San Francisco. Hot Water Music had a reunion tour which ran from September 7th to October 7th, only to go right back into the UK leg of the revival tour 9 days later on October 16th and wrapping up on November 20th. To say Ragan may have bit off more than he could chew may have been an understatement. Given the intensity of both Hot Water Music and the revival tour, it must have taken a lot of energy to keep going. Yet he brought on Emily Parker, Corey Brannon, Jay Malinowski of Bedouin Soundclash, along with him for the UK leg of the revival tour. While the show didn't lose any of its intensity, the lesser-known names drew far less press coverage than even the Australian tour did, but the videos speak for themselves. 2013 started with another Hot Water Music tour with Law Dispute and the Menzingers. A month after the end of that tour, Chuck Ragan would take a staggered approach for the year's revival tour, carrying on with highlighting lesser-known talent Jenny O, Rocky Votolato, and Jenny Owen Youngs for the majority of the tour, though each falling off at different times while being joined by Rise Against Tim McIlrath and Dave House on select dates. ReadJunk.com instead of the Irving Plaza New York show, "This was my first revival tour and it won't be my last either. No stoppages." Dave House was later on making fun of Chuck Ragan about that, about how there shouldn't be any silence or delay. "I haven't heard of Rocky Votolato's music before, so it was nice to see him live." That's another good thing about revival, hearing people you haven't heard yet. If you haven't experienced a revival tour, be sure to check it out if it's playing in your city. You won't be disappointed. CLTampa.com instead of the Orlando show, "More general store jamboree than punk show. The tour has managed to lure in a wider audience and shows no sign of stopping." Before diving into a cover of Ring of Fire, Jenny Owen Youngs and bassist Ginsberg made a Venn diagram out of their arms, with one circle being country music, the other being awesome. They overlapped their arms, creating a single circle. "This represents this song," Jenny explained with a laugh. "Completely country and completely awesome. Anything that can break through our era's digital numbness and allow people to experience real emotion, be it joy or sadness, love or heartbreak, or all of these wrapped up into a single song, is a good thing. For that, I salute Ragan." Don St. Clair of RuckusMag.com said of the Los Angeles show, "Alkaline Trio's Dan Andriano claimed this tour changed my life. The audience remains just as enthused as the artists for the last of the songs as they were for the first. Everybody singing along, clapping, and dancing right until the end." And it was at that night at the El Rey Theater in Los Angeles that the revival tour died. In 2014, Chuck would put out his final solo studio album, Till Midnight, an album consisting almost entirely of love songs dedicated to his wife. It has a 75 on Metacritic, with 7 positive reviews and 3 mixed. It was also reviewed by far many more blogs and websites than any of his other releases. Despite being his last album, the years of constant touring had paid off by growing his audience and profile to the largest it ever got. Scott Recker of PopMatters.com gave Till Midnight a 7 out of 10. Chuck Ragan seems to be finally figuring out how to blend his past into the direction he has been heading. Some of the tracks have the roar of rock and roll and the fierceness of punk, while others have the control and ache of country, but the album succeeds in both blending and separating all of the influences and styles that he has gathered and groomed along the way. Till Midnight is an extremely important record for Ragan. From the opener, Something May Catch Fire, a loud, quiet, loud, energetic rocker that brings to mind Lucero, to the closer, For All We Care, a finger-picked heartbreaker that explodes into a monster of a chorus. He seems so much more sure of what he's doing. Till Midnight is the best Chuck Ragan solo album to date. It has nothing that seems unnecessary or out of place or labored. He seems zoned in, and I can't wait to see what's on his horizon. Andy Walsh from Renowned for Sound said, "The songwriting, arrangement, and even production are all instantly, effortlessly organic. It's easy to imagine this group of guys jamming away in Reagan's home having a good old time. It is organic, has a sense of togetherness about it, and appears to have been effortlessly crafted." Lauren from Scene Point Blank gave it a 7.2 out of 10. Till Midnight maintains the same tone as its predecessor, Covering Ground. It's generally positive in theme, while simultaneously searching for answers and companionship. Ragan sings what he knows, life on the road as a troubadour with a simple message. The instrumentation throughout the record always includes more than just a man and his guitar, most often also pulling from drums, bass, fiddle, and harmonica. Kurz from Sputnik Music gave the album yet another 4 out of 5. Ragan has transformed his own sound from that of a folk artist with country flourishes to that of a bar band, albeit a fantastic one. Ragan sounds like he is really having fun on Till Midnight. Previous albums have been marked by pain and regret, but here there is more of an air of camaraderie, almost as if he has decided to enjoy the now. Listening to Till Midnight feels like walking into your favorite dive with your friends and sharing some whiskey and laughs. It might be the biggest success in Chuck's decade-long solo career. Thomas of Punk Rock Theory gave it an 8.5 out of 10. Other than the band expansion, not a lot has changed though, and that is a good thing. Ragan has always been known for his hard-on-sleeve lyrics, and of course, his gravelly vocals that express passion and sincerity like few others out there. Plus, the guy knows how to write a solid song. As much as I already like his previous albums, Till Midnight is by far Chuck Ragan's most accomplished album to date, and comes with 10 songs that will make you smile, sing along, want to drink, jump up and down, and maybe even shed a tear. Kinda like life itself when you think about it. Jordan Rogowski of punknews.org gave it a 4.5 out of 5. The 10 songs that comprise this album, Ragan's fourth, implement punk, folk, bluegrass, and rock and roll into a tapestry that some of his earlier records couldn't boast. The visceral aggression of older songs like The Boat have become more full and layered experiences. The punchy acoustic rhythms of older songs like Between the Lines have given way to more thoughtful and constructive salvos. To be perfectly clear, this is far and away the best record Ragan has done. Much of the reason for that fuller sound is the group of musicians accompanying Ragan. That exemplifies the dynamism previous records were sorely lacking. The energy was always there, the gruff, rousing vocals were always there, and now, so is the soul required to really fill a room with sound. That's also where Ragan leaves you, thinking about curiously tapping your feet and your steering wheel, singing along in a bar full of people, building a house. The important thing isn't what you're doing, just that Till Midnight is right there with you for it. And this is just scratching the surface of all the good reviews of the album out there. He went back on tour to support it with the same backing band he had throughout the Revival tour, now going by the name The Camaraderie, a dedication to the overall vibe felt amongst bands and concert attendees of the Revival tour. Throughout 2014, he would tell the press the Revival tour wasn't dead, saying things like, "We've been working on it, trying to figure out what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, you know? It's such a huge undertaking, and yeah, I'm not sure when the next one is going to be. I just released this Till Midnight record, and that was kind of going to be our focus for a while. So the Revival tour will come back here for sure, you know? It's such a special tour, it's such a cool thing, and just great fun. So we'll make it happen one of these days." To Melanie Gardiner at Interview Magazine, he said, "I'd taken a break from really hitting it hard on the road, and the time served me really well for my own well-being and reflection. I find a ton of inspiration from the artists that I'm writing with, that I'm playing shows with, and that I'm sitting down and having coffee with. The Revival tour had a lot to do with that." In an interview with the Punk site, he would go on to say, "Between my solo stuff, the Revival tour, and Hot Water Music, every one of those things has to do with me being away from home, or being on the road. Constantly living on the merry-go-round of the touring cycle can really be tough for family members back home, and they're the true glue that holds it all together. To me and what I did and went through from 2008 to 2013, 2014 was slowing down quite a bit. It just seemed more focused, and that's what really needed to happen. I loved doing the Exister record with Hot Water Music at the Blasting Room, and that was a real pleasure, but right around then I was also still in the Covering Ground touring cycle, also doing some Revival tour stuff, and had also just released a book. Basically, I just had a whole lot of irons in the fire, and just toward the end of 2012, maybe middle of 2013, I started sitting back and decided to pick my battles, spend time at home, and just try and focus. That's the main reasons why there wasn't much happening with Revival tour in 2014. Till Midnight was the focus for sure, and then celebrating the 20-year anniversary of Hot Water Music only really lasted for a couple of weeks. But despite a one-off Revival tour show I actually got to attend out by San Diego in 2019, the Revival tour was finished. While it was a great concert with Chuck, Dave House, and Dan Adriano, playing in the same style of the Revival tour, I couldn't help but think had I ever had the chance to see the Revival tour in its heyday, it would have been a much rowdier show with a bigger impact. And reading all the articles, reviews, and interviews about it, there's no denying that the lucky few who ever saw the Revival tour witnessed something extraordinary. In the same interview with the Punk site, Chuck would go on to say, "When I look back now, you know, my mother was a performer, and we grew up going to revivals, and granted, it was a totally different genre. When we finally got around to doing it, I just love the fact that it is an old way of sharing music, and for me, a very healthy way of sharing music by just making it more communal and open, doing away with the hierarchy that we seem to find when big build shows are on. To us, what we wanted to do was not only spotlight these songwriters that weren't well known, but also root and support the underdogs and present people that we feel the world needs to hear. I can't tell you, over the course of the Revival Tour, we hosted over 150 different people, and it's incredible how many of them I've found were just not known and incredible. And that's just the nature of the beast. Just music, you know? Some of us who are the headliners aren't any better than anybody else. In the beginning, honestly, it just started with shaking hands with a buddy. Ben Nichols was one of the first artists who agreed to do it. And then him and I sat down and said, who else? Let's go get Tim Barry. And that's how the first tour started, man. In 2008, the Revival Tour was 3 friends who all came from the same background. The final Revival Tour consisted of Chuck and a revolving door of lesser known artists, most of whom he had just recently met. Chuck had hoped that these artists and other artists who were exposed to the Revival Tour would continue after he stopped doing it. Sadly, that never happened. It was only 5 years and 7 runs and over 150 different artists. It may not have been an original idea, but it was something new to the punk scene and something that amazed anyone who witnessed it or was a part of it. It was more than a series of tours. It was this labor of love that was made at a great sacrifice. It all but consumed the life of Chuck Ragan as he went out and gave it his all every night, hoping to achieve this vision he had possibly since seeing his mother do something similar as a child. In doing so, he had to sacrifice his relationship with his wife, something that must have weighed heavily on him, as it always came up in his interviews. Hell, some of the best songs he made as a solo artist are about how much he loves and misses his wife. At some point, he chose her over the Revival Tour, and he seemingly never stopped doing so. In 2015, he slowed down more than ever. He had no new music to tour with. Revival Tour was over. Outside the one-off show here and there, and short runs with Hot Water Music, Chuck has stepped away from music quite a bit. In the meantime, he got a new day job as a fishing guide, something that not only kept him close to home, but brought him great joy, as he had always loved the outdoors, and the water specifically, often going fishing first thing in the morning throughout the Revival Tour. He traded the famously rowdy and drunken nights of playing live acoustic music with his friends for a quiet domestic life with his wife and dog. He made promises about the tour coming back in 2015, but that never came to fruition, and for good reason. In 2015, Chuck said to Rock Shot magazine, "I would love to bring Revival out again. We're working on a few things, but it's really a tough tour to organize. It's been 8 years now. We've had the opportunity to take it all over Europe, Canada, the States, Australia, and people love it. We love it. It seems like it's a wonderful thing. It really pulls people together, so we'll definitely do it again. I have all the love and respect for these people that I play with, and not only that, but love and respect for the people who come out to these shows. That I'm forever grateful for." When asked, lastly, looking back, when you started out, is there any advice you'd give yourself knowing what you know now? To which Chuck said, "Yeah, I'd probably say pace myself, take better care of myself, and don't waste so many nights away." See, that's kind of a trick question, because it's hard for me to have any regrets. I love where I am. I don't have any regrets. I mean, I should probably have drank less and done more yoga and swam more.
You never really know how long it's gonna last, and that to me is the reason why it's just so important to be appreciative for the time that you have, the opportunity to do this, and for the people who come and support it. Through all those rough times that I went through in, living a life on the road, living out of a bag, sleeping on floors, and just abusing my body, if I would have done anything differently, I may not have ended up on this path and have found her and ended up in the place that I'm in now. Come middle of May, I'm gonna be a daddy, and this is new. So it's going to be a completely different world for me when it comes, and my wife as well, when it comes to traveling. I probably won't be traveling as much anymore. I'm gonna do my best not to be an absent father, an absent daddy, and this day is coming very soon. We're all growing older. Life changes, and it's changing in a beautiful way, and it's time for the next chapter of our life. Biggest change lately is I'm now a daddy. My wife and I had our first baby boy, Grady Joseph, he just is about to turn 3 months old. So he's a brand new baby boy, and he's a good boy, and it's tough. It's tough being away, you know. And I don't know how much I'll be away from him. I seem to tour less and less, which to me is a good thing. In many ways, I think that it's important to always have diversity in your life, even in your work. I love playing music. I love visiting people. I love being a part of these music communities. But if you do something day in and day out, anything can become old or stagnant. You can kind of forget how special things are if it's something that you're repeating all the time. So to me, you know, slowing down in many ways is just making it better, you know, making it more positive. You know, I feel the older we get, the more we realize how short life is. You know, you tend to appreciate what you have a little bit more.
Hey, thanks for watching the Revival Tour video. It took a long time to put this one together, and believe it or not, this is the most concise and shortest version of this video I could think of making. So if you enjoyed it, make sure you hit like and subscribe, and comment below what you think of the Revival Tour or some of your memories. And until then, see you next time. Peace.